Now that we've made it through the entire course, let's go ahead and put it all together. In this video, I'm gonna show you what my general workflow is every time I edit a photo. This means I'm gonna give you a general order that you can follow to apply all of these techniques in from start to finish. I know we went over a ton of stuff, and this will help contextualize all of it into the final picture. So let's go ahead and start from the very top. The first thing I do when I get my photos is I import them to my hard drives, rename the photos, and create a file structure for them. The second thing I do is I pull those photos into Lightroom. From here, I organize them into collections and cull out the photos that I actually want to edit. The next thing I do is my 4 preliminary Lightroom edits, which are my raw adjustments that can only be done in Lightroom or a Camera Raw. At this point, I will now send the photos to Photoshop, and I will determine if they need a focus stack. If they need a focus stack, I will go ahead and initiate that action and get that all set up and ready to go. From this point, I will now do any exposure blends that need to be done. So this means any sky blending, sky replacements, focal blending, or time blending. I will get the photo all synced into a singular image. The next step in the process is I'm gonna go through and do any spot removal and healing that needs to be done. This means I'm gonna remove any sensor spots, get any people out of the images, or remove any unwanted branches or natural features that are distracting to the eye. This is also a good time to do any frequency separation. So if you need to remove any lens flares or footprints in snow or sand. At this point, I can begin to move into my transformation edits on the image. So what I'm gonna do is go ahead and convert all of the layers below this into a singular smart object. From here, I can now begin to warp mountains to be bigger, straighten any horizons or trees, liquefy any rocks, or any transformation / warp based adjustments that need to be done non-destructively. Once that is all done, I could start to move into my basic adjustments. So here I could start to apply hue / saturation adjustment layers, curve adjustments, or any of the adjustments that we went over in the adjustments chapter. The next step is I will move on to more advanced adjustments with luminosity masks. So now I can start to get really specific with where I want these adjustments and begin to select areas that aren't generally covered with basic adjustments and basic masking techniques. Now that I have the luminosity masks where I want them, I will now begin to move into dodging and burning. So at this point, I'm gonna start to make sure I have a singular light source coming in and make sure that all the trees, rocks, objects, mountains, whatever, are brushed up in a certain way to reflect that the light is coming from a singular direction. Once that is all tuned up, I will move into gradient work. So at this point, I will begin to apply a vignette, a spotlight if I need to emphasize the subject even more, or do any edge fading to make sure the eye is really pulled into where the subject of the image is. At this point, I will now apply any filters that need to be added to the image. For example, an Orton effect for a dreamy look, or a high pass filter if I need to add some texture or clarity, or even a noise filter if I need to add noise. I could go ahead and copy all the layers below this and merge them into a single layer, turn it into a smart filter layer, and now overlay that filter over the top of everything. At this point, the image is essentially done, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and start to finalize it. So I'm gonna zoom in really closely to all the corners of the image, make sure there's no sensor spots or branches or distractions or anything that I might have missed. I'm now gonna go into a cool down period as well. So this is where I'm gonna go step away from the image for about 24 hours and just go do literally anything else besides editing to just refresh my slate for this image when I go back to it. Once I hop back to that image, I can go through and make any adjustments that I see fit. One thing to note is that if you need to make any pixel-based adjustments, you can simply hit Control-Alt-Shift-E, which will go ahead and make a merge of all the layers below that, copy it, and paste that layer over the top. So now I could go through and do those pixel-based edits if I need to. Another thing to note is that if I need to do any warp-based adjustments, I could also go ahead and select all of those layers below this and convert them into a single smart object. From there, I could go ahead and warp and make any transformations non-destructively at this point. And if you remember from the Smart Objects chapter, if I need to go back and access any of those layers, I can simply double click on that smart object and Photoshop will open up another tab where I could go through and access or edit any of those layers from earlier in the session. So that is how you can do this full process completely non-destructively. I will now move into the final step of the process, which is where I output the file. Obviously, we have the files already set up and the folders ready to go. So I'll simply apply the name suffix to it, add the sharpening filter, make sure all the settings are ready to go, and export it. Now that is my entire process from start to finish. It's important to note that I don't always follow this order. This is just a general order for how I go through the images to do it in the least destructive way possible. Every image is different, and sometimes I need to jump ahead a few steps or jump back a few steps in order to make things right. So hopefully this video will help you contextualize everything and figure out a general workflow for how to go through everything we've learned in this course. The next portion of this course, I'm gonna go through and do full edits from start to finish. So you can begin to see this workflow process in action as I'm gonna show you full edits of videos that are completely uncut from start to finish so you can see every single step of the process. Let's go ahead and hop over to them.